a helpless grizzly bear cub, stuck deep inside a muddy pit, crying for help, too weak to escape. No mother in sight, no hope. Until a lone wolf appears from the edge of the trees, not as a hunter, but as something no one expected. What happens next defies the rules of nature, because when the cub's family finally arrives, what they do will leave you speechless. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications, because what you're about to witness is more than survival. It's proof that even in the wildest places, compassion is real. The first sound was faint, just a soft, wet splashing, like a stone struggling to float. The forest was quiet otherwise. No birds, no wind, just the scent of damp pine and moss. The wolf stopped moving. He was a loner, an older male with graying fur around his jaw. His pack had dispersed seasons ago, and he'd been living in solitude ever since, traveling between valleys in the Pacific Northwest in search of food and shelter. But this sound was not prey. It wasn't panic. It was desperation. He followed it through the trees. There, at the bottom of a steep slope where heavy rains had turned earth into sludge, was a pit, wide, deep, and clinging. In the middle of it, barely moving, was a small grizzly cub. Its paws flailed weakly, caked in thick mud. Its face, barely visible, turned upward with a quiet whimper. The wolf stopped at the edge. He didn't move. He didn't growl. He watched. The cub tried again to lift itself, but slid back into the pit, its sides sinking into the earth like quicksand. Its cry was softer now, more tired. The wolf stepped forward, slowly, ears up, head low. He had never been this close to a grizzly before, not like this. But something in the cub's eyes made him stay. Not fear, not threat, just pleading. Instinct warred with instinct. He should have walked away. It wasn't his kind. It wasn't his fight. But he didn't. He circled the pit, his paws skimming the edge, looking for a slope. When he found a slanted entrance, slick and narrow, he stepped in, claws digging for grip. The mud sucked at his legs, and twice he nearly slipped. But inch by inch, he reached the cub. It didn't resist. It just looked at him. The wolf lowered his head and gently took the cub's neck in his jaws, not biting, just holding. Slowly, carefully, he began pulling backward. The mud fought them. It held tight. The cub slipped once more, and the wolf had to reposition, bracing his legs in the sludge and pulling again. He growled, not at the cub, but at the mud, the weight, the helplessness. Then finally, the cub's front paw reached the edge. One more pull, one lunge. They were out. Both collapsed in the grass beside the pit, covered in mud, panting hard. The cub lay trembling, too weak to stand. The wolf sat beside it, watching, guarding. And in that moment, far from humans, far from rules, something unspoken passed between them. Not fear, not power, but trust. They were two creatures who should never have met like this. And yet, the forest had written a different story, and it was only just beginning. The air remained heavy, thick with the scent of wet soil and pine. The mud pit behind them looked more like a shallow grave now than a trap. If the wolf had arrived even minutes later, the cub might have vanished into that earth forever. The wolf stood guard. His ribs moved slowly with each breath, his chest still rising and falling from the effort of the rescue. Mud clung to his legs like armor, now cracking and drying under the late afternoon sun. He shook once, sending bits of it flying into the grass. The cub flinched. It hadn't moved much since being pulled from the pit. The little bear lay curled on its side, eyes half open, whimpering softly. One paw twitched now and then, but it had no strength to stand. The wolf paced in a slow circle around him. This was no longer about curiosity. It wasn't even about instinct. Something deeper had taken root, a quiet sense of duty, like an invisible string tying him to this fragile life. Suddenly, the wind shifted. The wolf froze. He raised his nose high and sniffed. Someone was near. From the direction of the northern tree line came the faintest rustle. Leaves brushing, pine needles parting, the echo of a heavy footstep. The cub heard it too. It lifted its head slightly and let out a weak cry. Not of fear, of recognition. The wolf turned toward the sound, ears up, body tense. Then, emerging through the filtered light of the forest, a silhouette, massive, powerful, unmistakable. An adult grizzly bear. Its eyes locked onto the scene, the cub lying helpless and muddy, and the wolf standing over it. She let out a low, guttural sound. Not a roar, a warning. Another rustle. Two more figures appeared behind her, slightly smaller, but just as imposing. The rest of the pack. The wolf didn't move. He didn't growl, didn't run. He simply stepped to the side, allowing full view of the cub, and lowered his head slightly. Not submissive, but respectful. A gesture older than language. The matriarch approached. Her steps were slow but sure, cautious but unflinching. The cub cried again, this time louder, trying to lift its body, reaching toward her with one trembling paw. She hurried now. With one deep grunt, she was beside her baby, sniffing him, licking the mud from his fur, letting out small sounds of reassurance. The other bears circled closer but didn't interfere. The wolf took a step back. His part was done, or so he thought. But as he turned to slip into the brush, a sound stopped him. Not a growl, not a roar, a breath. The matriarch was staring directly at him. Again. This time, her gaze wasn't just sharp, it was searching, as if trying to understand what couldn't be explained. Why would a predator of another kind risk itself for a cub? There was no answer. Just the forest. Just the sun lowering behind the trees. Just two creatures from opposite worlds, standing still in a shared silence. Then, in a moment as subtle as the wind shifting leaves, she blinked and lowered her head. A nod. The wolf remained still, watching as she gently nudged her cub to stand. He tried, legs shaking, body swaying, but finally found footing beside her. Together, they walked away. The other bears followed slowly, occasionally glancing back at the wolf who had, for a brief moment, become something else. The wolf turned his head skyward and listened. The forest was quiet again, but not the same. He stood there for a long time, alone once more. But something had changed. He had acted on something rare in his world, and the forest had answered not with violence, but with understanding. And somewhere deep in those woods, a cub was alive. Because of him. Long after the grizzly pack had vanished into the dense woodland, the wolf remained still. Only the whisper of the leaves above stirred, catching the last golden threads of sunlight. His body ached, not from injury, but from tension. The kind that settled in the muscles when the wild balance had nearly tipped too far. The pit was behind him now, a grave-shaped scar in the landscape. Its muddy outline felt like the remains of a nightmare. But the cub was alive. He had seen it walk, trembling but determined, pressed close to its mother's side. That image clung to him more deeply than instinct, more powerfully than hunger. It wasn't something he understood. It was just something that was. Stillness returned to the woods, but it was a different kind of silence. Not the hollow quiet of danger, but the deep, reflective hush that follows something important. He turned away from the clearing and moved toward the stream. There, he drank. Long, deep gulps. Mud stained his paws and belly. His chest was still heavy from the sprint and struggle, and his eyes blinked slowly as the cool water touched his tongue. He didn't eat that night. There was no urgency to hunt, no gnawing emptiness in his stomach that rivaled the fullness of what had just passed. But there was still something missing. As night fell, the wind picked up, soft and damp, carrying the scent of pine needles, old bark, and something else. Smoke. Distant. Controlled. Human. The wolf paused, ears twitching. A low growl rumbled in his throat, not out of fear, but as a warning to himself. That direction. That smell. It came from the outer edge of the forest, where trails of bare earth were carved by boots and fires were made by hands that didn't belong to the trees. He had always avoided that territory, not out of instinct, but from hard memory. Years ago, he had learned what humans meant, but tonight felt different. He followed the scent, carefully, quietly. About a mile through the woods, he reached a ridge where the forest thinned out. Below it, a small campsite flickered. A single tent. A smoldering fire. No movement. Then, a sound. A distant yelp. Short. Sharp. Then silence again. He waited. And when it didn't return, he circled lower, toward the edge of the camp. From between the trees, he saw it. A dog, tied to a post, injured, limping, perhaps from a twisted leg, but still alive. The wolf tilted his head. Something stirred inside him. It wasn't the same as with the bear cub, but it rhymed. A thread of familiarity, a soft echo of need. Just then, a voice called out. A human voice. Calm, tired. "Come on, girl. We'll get you to the vet tomorrow." A man stepped into view. Late 40s, face weathered by sun and years, wearing a forest ranger's badge and holding a canteen. His presence wasn't threatening, just tired. The dog wagged its tail, gently, despite the pain. The wolf stepped back into the shadows. He was not part of this world. But for the second time that day, he had felt something unexpected. Connection. Fragile and fleeting. The kind that came not from blood, but from understanding. He turned and walked away, leaving no sound behind him but the rustle of underbrush. Back in the heart of the forest, beneath a canopy of stars, he lay down near an old fallen log, curled his body against the cool earth, and closed his eyes. Somewhere out there, the cub slept with its mother. The dog rested near its human. And the wolf, once a lone shadow of instinct, now carried within him something more. A question, one that the wild could not answer. What happens to a creature when it begins to care? Morning came slowly through the tall spruce trees, shafts of sunlight cutting across the mist like quiet blades. The forest had reset itself, as if erasing all signs of the chaos from the day before. Birds sang cautiously, and the breeze smelled of wet moss and pine. But the wolf was already awake. He hadn't truly slept. His body rested, but his mind had circled the same question all night. Where had that feeling come from? And why did it follow him like a scent trail? He rose and shook the dew from his coat. The forest felt different today. Not dangerous, just waiting. He walked slowly toward a stream, drinking and watching the surface ripple. But then he heard it. A sound that didn't belong. It was faint, far, but unmistakable. A whimper. Not canine, not bear, not bird. Human. The wolf froze. His ears twitched, his eyes narrowed. He waited. There it was again. A choked cry. Weak, broken, but real. Instinct told him to run. This was human territory. Human problems. But something deeper held him in place. He moved toward the sound, every step calculated, quiet. The sun had risen higher now, cutting across the forest floor in patches of gold and shadow. He came to a clearing, and what he saw stopped him cold. A man, the same forest ranger from the night before, lying motionless beside a collapsed ridge. His leg was twisted unnaturally beneath him, and a large gash bled through his pant leg. Nearby, a fallen tree branch, snapped from the heavy winds overnight, must have given way beneath him. The dog was there too, whimpering, licking his face, pacing in circles. The wolf stood at the edge of the clearing, not hidden, just watching. The ranger groaned and opened one eye. His gaze locked with the wolf's. There was no fear, just confusion, pain, and strangely, relief. He whispered something. The wolf couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. A plea, a call for help not shouted, but spoken with the last breath of strength. And the wolf did something wild, something unthinkable. He stepped into the clearing. The dog stopped pacing. The wolf approached slowly, every part of him alert. Not aggressive, not submissive, just present. He reached the man, stood over him. The ranger reached out a shaking hand, but didn't touch. He just held it there. And the wolf stood. The moment stretched, a suspended string of time where nothing moved but the wind. Then the wolf turned. He walked away, toward the trail, then looked back. Once, then again. The dog barked. Once, then followed. And the wolf ran. Not away, but toward help, toward a ranger station 2 miles east. He didn't know what he would find. He didn't know if anyone would be there. But he ran anyway. Not for himself, not for instinct, but because he had seen the same helplessness in the man's eyes that he had seen in the cub's. And somewhere in the wild mathematics of the soul, that meant everything. The wolf ran. His paws barely touched the forest floor, leaves and pine needles scattering with each bound. The silence of the woods gave way to the sound of snapping twigs, quick breaths, and a heart that beat not for survival, but for something more. He didn't know why. He didn't know how. But he ran, guided by the same pull that had brought him to the cub. Behind him, the man lay broken. Time was slipping. The dog trailed not far behind now, yelping every few strides as if urging the wolf onward. 2 miles. Just 2 miles to the ranger station. The path wasn't smooth. It twisted through thickets and slopes, and once the wolf stumbled over a hidden root and slid into a ditch. He shook it off. Blood matted one paw pad, but he didn't slow. Not even when a startled deer bolted across his path. Not even when a hawk screamed overhead. The ranger station sat near a logging road, its wooden cabin nestled between 3 large firs. On most days, it was deserted. But not today. Today, there was someone inside. The wolf broke through the tree line and skidded to a stop in the gravel clearing. A rusted red pickup truck was parked outside. The front door of the cabin was open. Inside, a young woman in a brown uniform stood with her back to the window, holding a clipboard. The wolf barked. Once. Loud. Urgent. She didn't turn. He barked again. Then again. Finally, the woman, Rachel Myers, part-time ranger and wildlife responder, stepped onto the porch and froze. Her eyes widened at the sight of the wild wolf just yards from her steps, panting, muddy, blood on its front leg. She reached slowly for her radio. Her training screamed at her to stay back, to keep calm. But something in the wolf's eyes made her hesitate. It wasn't aggression. It was desperation. The dog burst out of the woods behind him, fur matted, tongue lolling. It limped past the wolf and came directly to Rachel's feet, barking, looking back into the trees, then forward again. The wolf turned. He walked several steps toward the trail, then back, then looked at her. Rachel lowered the radio. "You want me to follow you?" she whispered. He stepped forward, then turned again, looked over his shoulder. Rachel ran inside, grabbed her med kit, and jumped into the truck. The dog leapt into the back seat, whining. She didn't even hesitate. "Show me," she said. The wolf ran, this time with an engine behind him. The dirt road was narrow, but Rachel knew these trails well. She followed the wolf as best she could, slowing when the terrain grew rough. He waited when needed. He doubled back when she fell too far, and 20 minutes later, they reached the fallen ridge. Rachel stopped the truck and bolted from the door. There he was. The ranger, Luke, barely conscious. His leg broken, face pale. The dog rushed to him immediately, licking his face. Rachel knelt beside him. "You're okay. I'm here. Stay with me." She opened the med kit, applied pressure, stabilized his leg, and called for emergency evac over the radio. In the distance, the wolf stood watching. He didn't approach. Didn't need to. His job was done. But before vanishing into the brush, he met Rachel's eyes. And for the briefest moment, something passed between them, an understanding that defied species or language. Then he disappeared into the wild, where he belonged, but not before saving a life, just as he had once been saved. The helicopter arrived in less than 15 minutes, its blades slicing the sky above the forest. The air was thick with dust and rotor wash as the medics descended, lifting Luke carefully onto the stretcher. Rachel helped, her hands steady but her heart still pounding. They flew him out, toward the nearest hospital in Duluth. The dog, bruised but loyal, was loaded into the vehicle with him. Rachel stood alone in the clearing as the chopper disappeared behind the canopy. But she wasn't alone. She turned toward the trees. Nothing. Then, a flash of movement. Ears. A tail. Watching. The wolf had stayed. Not near. Not close enough to alarm, but present. Rachel didn't approach. She didn't speak. Instead, she slowly sat down on a mossy log and waited. It took minutes, then longer. Eventually, the wolf stepped into view, eyes locked. No growl, no fear. Just two beings, one wild, one human, sharing a silence more meaningful than words. Rachel reached into her pack and gently pulled out a small strip of jerky. She tossed it halfway. The wolf didn't flinch, didn't take a step, but he looked down at it, then back at her, and with a calm grace, turned and melted into the trees. She didn't see him again that day. A week passed. Luke survived. His leg would take months to fully heal, but his spirit was intact. He didn't remember much, only pain, the sound of barking, and a blur of gray fur. But Rachel told him everything, and in the telling, something in her voice changed. It wasn't just a story of survival, it was something deeper. She returned to the trail 3 days later, walking with care, leaving no food, just her presence. Then again, a day after. And on the 4th visit, she found tracks. Wolf, large, deep, waiting. She smiled. 2 months passed. Autumn came early that year. The leaves burned gold and amber, and the air grew thin. Rachel, now back on full-time ranger duty, was assigned a check-in on the northern forest line near Black Pine Ridge, a place few ever went. She took the assignment without hesitation, and that's where she found it. The den, or rather, the remnants of it. Signs of recent habitation, scattered fur, claw marks on the bark, and unmistakable bear tracks mingled with wolf prints. Together, like a trail shared. She followed them quietly to a small clearing and stopped. There, across the stream, were 3 figures: a grizzly bear, a cub, and the wolf. The same wolf. The cub was larger now, healthy, its coat thick with winter fur. It playfully nipped at the bear's leg, then turned and nudged the wolf. No tension, no threat. A family. Strange, borrowed, yet somehow whole. Rachel didn't move, didn't breathe. Tears welled in her eyes at the sight. Not because it was miraculous, but because it was real. Wounds had healed. Lives had changed. The wild had made room for love in its own language. And in that clearing, between fallen logs and ancient roots, something impossible had unfolded. A bond that no scientist could ever fully explain. A cub, a bear, a wolf, and a memory that would live forever in the hearts of those who had witnessed it. Snow had begun to settle gently over the forest. Soft flurries danced between pine branches, blanketing the ground in white silence. Rachel walked alone along the familiar trail, now marked with new prints. Smaller, deeper, meandering across the frozen ground. It had been 3 weeks since she last saw the wolf, the bear, and the cub together. She hadn't returned since. Not out of fear, but out of respect. But today felt different. She stopped at the edge of the clearing. The stream was frozen now, a silver ribbon through the trees. And there, as if summoned by memory, they stood. The mother bear, strong and serene, rested beside a fallen log. The cub, larger now and full of energy, rolled in the snow nearby. And just beyond them, silent, alert, watchful, was the wolf. Rachel didn't move, didn't call out. Instead, she reached into her jacket and pulled out something small, a leather-bound field notebook. She scribbled a line. They understand more than we give them credit for. They choose. And sometimes, they choose love. The wind shifted, and the wolf turned. Their eyes met once more. It was brief, a flicker of recognition. Not ownership, not domestication, just respect. Rachel nodded softly. The wolf lowered its head. Then the cub bounded forward, full of mischief, and nudged the wolf's shoulder. They chased each other in the snow like siblings, tumbling, circling, yelping. Rachel laughed. A sound so natural it startled a few birds from a nearby tree. In that moment, something clicked deep within her. A realization that the wild wasn't separate from humanity. It was a mirror, a truth, a reminder of what we lose when we stop seeing with our hearts. She knelt down, pulled a camera from her bag, and took one photo. Not to share, not for science, just for her. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the snowy branches, the bears retreated toward the hills, the wolf following. The cub looked back once more, not in longing, but as if to say, "Thank you." Rachel watched them go until they disappeared between the trees. Then she stood, brushed snow from her knees, and began walking back to her ranger station. Luke had healed well. He still walked with a slight limp, but his spirit was brighter. They often sat on the porch of the station now, sharing stories, coffee, and quiet admiration for the world around them. Sometimes the dog would lift his head and bark at nothing, but they knew he was out there, watching. A guardian without borders, a creature who had once chosen to save. If this story moved your heart, if it reminded you that even in the harshest wild, compassion exists, then take a moment now to reflect on the bond between us and the world we share. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this story with someone who believes that love needs no language and courage wears many faces, even those covered in fur. Because sometimes the most powerful rescue is the one we never expected.